Welcome to the Writer Reads, the Ransomeers, Book 1, A Planet's Ransom, Chapter 1, Hostages for the World. It was a first world problem. You know, one of those problems that's only ever a problem because the civilization is too far advanced to really have to worry about the basics, such as food and water and a safe place to sleep, even if that's never true. There's always someone who has to worry about the basics. I was definitely having a problem of the first world sort with the internet down. And I wasn't the only one. A lot of people were experiencing the same thing, judging from the half-suppressed sighs and looks of muted frustrations that travelled around the classroom. And not just the internet, I realized when I tried a secretive text beneath my desk, but the telephone links as well. If everyone would please put their mobiles on their desks, Miss Rogers said, we'll get on with the class. But miss, they're not working. If you're not using them in class, how do you know? The protests overrode her observation, rippling around the classroom until she raised her hands in exasperation. All right, she said, bargain. You all copy down the homework from the board and let me check when you're done, and I'll see if I can find out if anyone knows anything about why the phones have stopped working. We grumbled, but it was a fair call. It was also the only way we'd copy down the homework. Firstly, because it was homework, and then we'd have to do it. And secondly, because it meant we'd actually have to do some work, and we'd cruised this far without working, so we didn't see the point. She stood firm, and then kept her word, admonishing us to get an early start on the homework while she checked out the problem. Turns out she had to leave the room, because the school's internal phone system wasn't working either. Some of us got started on the homework. Others just took the opportunity to catch up on the latest gossip. When Miss Rogers got back, she was as white as a sheet. Children, she said, I need you to follow me, in 2 lines, quietly and quickly. She didn't give us time for comment, but strode quickly to the door and stood in front of it. 2 lines, she said, and wouldn't budge until we'd obeyed. Our protests were merely met with the same 2 words. Somewhere along the line, her sense of urgency finally got through, and we stopped arguing. Other classes were also filing out of their classrooms, their teachers looking just as stressed out as ours. I started to wonder what had gone wrong. Miss, is everything okay? I called, but she kept walking. Quickly now, she ordered, and we followed, out through the school gate and onto one of the buses waiting out front. It had Australian Air Force down the side. Get in, she snapped, when one of the others asked what was going on. I think if he'd pushed the protest further, we might all have jacked up until we were told what was wrong. But all the adults were far too serious, and then there were the soldiers, 4 for each bus. They told us to buckle in and they'd explain as soon as we were underway. Given they were armed, they had our complete attention. Miss Rogers seemed more than happy to hand us over to them. Me, not so much. So, I said, when we were on the bus and no one else spoke up, what gives? But there was a crackle from the front of the bus, and the soldier who seemed to be in charge raised a hand. What is it? He asked, but he wasn't talking to me. It's time, came the answer, clear enough over the radio for all of us to hear. Time for what? I demanded, not at all happy about being ignored. We'd been promised an explanation, for pity's sake. My explanation came in the blinding glare that flared around the bus and then vanished just as quick. We were still blinking things back into focus when a loudspeaker sounded out around us. You will surrender your weapons. The soldiers exchanged glances, but they obeyed. We watched as they unslung their rifles and dropped them into a bag, which they handed to the guy in charge. He took it and did the same with his gun. The driver also handed over a rifle, and that was when we realized the bus had stopped. Hey, someone said, and we all turned, and that's when the scene outside the bus caught our attention. We weren't on the highway anymore. As a matter of fact, we weren't even on the planet. Not if those things standing on walkways looking down at us were anything to go by. The bus door slid open, and the soldier dumped the duffel bag out the door and then stepped back inside. When the door slid closed again, he turned to us. I promised you an explanation, he said. I had hoped to give you some warning, but our hosts have seen fit to act first. We are, in essence, our planet's hostages. As long as our world leaders do as they've been asked and the majority of the population complies, we'll be okay. Now that was something we hadn't anticipated. I'm sorry we couldn't warn you, he said, but your school was chosen and we All thought they'd give us more time to negotiate. For once we were quiet, us looking at him, and him looking at us. And then one of the other girls started to cry. "What about our parents?" I asked, raising my voice to be heard over her tears. "They'll be given the choice of joining you, along with your siblings. But I'm sorry, it was the best we could do." "Why?" I managed, and he looked at me. It was not a friendly look. "We're being invited to join their federation." "We're being annexed?" I asked, remembering the Ukrainian thing. He grimaced. "Apparently it's a development opportunity." "We're hostages," I reminded him, "for a bunch of people who don't know how to behave." "I'm sure we'll be fine," he said. And fortunately, he was right. At least to start with. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this reading, please hit like. If you'd like to hear more, please hit subscribe. And I'll check you later. Take care out there.